We have several topics. I do want to mention that normally this time of year, for those people that are familiar with our November board meetings, we get sort of a first very high-level look at some budgetary items, but we don't have that this year. As you may recall, last year there was not an agreement on a state budget, so we operated under the previous year's budget, and we have not received any new information this year, so we do not have that on our agenda for this evening. But we do have some very important topics, beginning with school calendar, which is always very important for teachers and staff, but particularly for parents and students. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over for Dr. Weaver to talk about school calendar.
Good evening. Just a quick audio check. Can everyone hear me? Making sure I don't need to reboot. All right, great. So school calendar. And Dr. Medeiros has it pulled up, and I believe you have paper copies there with you. So we're really bound with calendar legislation and don't have a tremendous amount of flexibility. I've been doing the school calendar for Transylvania County Schools for 7 years now, I guess. And it's always very nice to have the committee come together. It is comprised of parents, of representatives from each of our schools. All 9 schools were represented, and we did have parent representatives on the committee this year. And I usually begin by giving a blank draft calendar that is built off of the prior school year's calendar as a starting point to lead the discussion. So we'll begin in August, and just to have some discussion there, we did qualify for a calendar waiver for 21-22. That calendar waiver allows us to start 1 week earlier. So that would be the Monday closest to August 19th. So we can start this year on Monday, August the 16th, instead of Monday, August the 23rd, since we qualify for the calendar waiver. I do want to bring up that was a widely accepted start date by the calendar committee, because that did afford us to end first semester before winter break, before Christmas holidays, which is really crucial for high school students to have those exams before they leave for a 2-week break and then return and review for a few days for exams. So committee was in agreement for student day, August the 16th. 2 mandatory required teacher work days, the Thursday and Friday before that date with our teacher work days. And I will say anything that we add in the middle of the start date, the first day for students and the last day for students, extends our school year. So if we were to take some of these teacher work days that are during that first week of August the 9th and place them in between August the 16th and May the 27th, then that would make the end date extend for our students. So we'll just keep that in mind as we move through the months. In September, that first Friday, we elected to keep remote learning days in our calendar this year. This was required by legislative action for our current school year. And what a remote learning day is staff is on campus providing instruction remotely, virtually, for our students when they're home. And we do feel like that it's important to continue with some remote learning days in our calendar to, one, make sure we're staying in the front edge of technology and using those devices and having those devices ready if we need to be out of school for pandemic reasons or for weather-related issues. So our first remote learning day is on September the 3rd. Remote learning days really layer on top of our teacher work days. So our expectation this year was provide that remote learning instruction till approximately noon each day. And then afternoon would be used for teacher workday items, finalizing grades, contacting parents, just lesson planning, those types of activities. And then Monday, September 6th is Labor Day holiday for us. And then we move into October, and we did place the early release days back on Fridays. We've been doing that for the past 2 years. Very strong feedback from parents on early release days being on Fridays. They appreciate that because it's a little easier for childcare, making arrangements, and it allows for more continuity in the week is one of the things that I've heard from teachers, that if we had it in the middle of the week, it disrupts the flow of the week a little bit. So having it either at the end or beginning of a week was the request. We end first quarter on October the 15th with 44 student days. We have a teacher work day and a remote day after that on October 18th and 19th. We move into November. The only required holiday by legislation is Veterans Day. So we have that as a holiday, and we should. And then we have our traditional annual leave day on Wednesday prior to Thanksgiving, and then Thanksgiving break. That's always a very strong topic of discussion in calendar committee. No one wants to remove that Wednesday break to allow for a little more family and travel time if necessary. Then in December, high school exams would take place or could take place on the last 5 student days, which would be December 16th, 17th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. And then we would end the 22nd on a half day and enter into winter break Christmas holidays, returning for students on January the 6th, and that would be the first day of second 9 weeks. And Mr. Kevinimi pointed out, caught something for me here. I did not put a report card distribution date for second 9 weeks on the calendar, but that would be on January the 18th. We would send out report cards to parents. January the 17th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is an annual leave day. Into February, we do have a remote learning day on President's Day, which is February the 21st. And end of third quarter, 133 student days. And then into April with spring break occurring, and Easter is on April the 17th for that year. So typically in the past few years, we've had a Friday as an annual leave day and then spring break week. And that Friday has been kind of associated with Good Friday prior to spring break. Parents and teachers both responded that we're on the calendar committee that if we had it after Easter, that might be beneficial for those who were traveling to see family on the 17th. I will point out that our spring break week is not going to coincide with Blue Ridge Community College's calendar for their spring break week. Their spring break week is the week of March 14th. We discussed this. This was something they took back to their schools, and we discussed, it is going to impact some of our high school students that are taking courses at Blue Ridge Community College. What it would mean is during the week of March 14th, they wouldn't have their college courses or Blue Ridge Community College courses to attend, but during our spring break week, they would need to attend those courses, those classes. So some of the feedback from the committee, March 14th is very early for a spring break, we felt. They also like to keep it close to Easter holiday. And we felt like it was too long of a time span between March 15th and the end of the school calendar for that long of a period of time. So we all felt pretty strongly that that second full week in April was the best time for us to have our spring break. And then in May, last student day is on Friday, May the 27th. So I do want to point out, this is before Memorial Day, the holiday on Monday, and it's not so much about finishing up before Memorial Day for convenience, but it is about helping us with the end of year testing that takes place. Because if we wrap over into the next week, then you could have students that would have a 3-day holiday, 3-day weekend, and then return for exams the next day. So that holiday actually breaks up the state dictated 5 days for high school testing and 10 days for middle school and elementary testing. So we didn't like that holiday being embedded in the middle of the high school exam week. So that was one of the pushes to try to get the last student day prior to Memorial Day weekend. So that's a month by month kind of description of our school calendar and what the calendar committee and I have put together for questions and or feedback.
Questions or comments?
I think it's a very workable schedule, and like I said, exams before Christmas is just great. Easter holiday will be different, but you have to work with the calendar with what you have. Thank you for the job in the committee, Brian.
Yes, Brian, I like this calendar as well. It's got 5 work days at the start of the school year for elementary students. We end the semester before at Christmas break. It's got a lot going for it.
I have one question, Brian. I don't know whether you have a schedule out now from the high school league about playoff dates. The only thing looking is this calendar that seems to be new to us. I don't think it's really ever happened to us that we could have athletic teams playing in the playoffs after we've already had graduation or dismissed them from school. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It is a possibility, and it's actually one of those things due to the modified times for sports this year that could be a possibility for us this current school calendar as well. But Mr. Griffin, I haven't seen a playoff projection for next school calendar year yet, but I think you're right.
I do have a couple of questions. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Just for my knowledge, how did we get the change in the start date? What basis was that done on?
So a calendar waiver is a weather-related waiver is submitted to the Department of Public Instruction. And if a school system has missed or has had modified days that are above a certain number each year, well, it's over a 10-year period. So you take 4 years out of that 10 years, and if we have a modified day, and that's either late start, and Dr. Medeiros, correct me if I'm wrong, but late start, early dismissal, we're having to have a virtual day, which isn't the same as a typical student day. Those days are recorded, and if we have a certain number that are missed 4 years out of a 10-year cycle, then we qualify for the weather waiver.
And it has to be, they used to count delays and early releases, but now it's a full day miss. And basically, it's a day where you do not have a normal school day because of weather.
All right. Second question I had was, did you say the second report card is the 18th or the 19th?
January the 18th.
Okay. And so then where it says report card 2 to issue on 21st, March 21st, that'll be the third one, right?
Yes, sir. That will be the third one.
All right. My curiosity is satisfied. I think it's a good calendar. I wouldn't have any trouble defending it if I had to. So, okey-doke.
Thank you. And tonight's, of course, information only. So during our February 15th meeting, we would have this on the agenda as an action item.
I have another question real quickly. Dr. Medeiros, would you repeat what you said about the way days are decided now again?
Well, the calendar rules have changed several times over the years. The latest version is it has to be a full day that has been missed of normal school, kids in the building, etc. There was a time for a while that they allowed us to count days where we had a late start or an early release, but those do not count now. It has to be a full disruption of the day.
When does that full instructional day start?
Oh, let's see. I want to say 3 to 4 years ago.
No, that's not what I asked. When does the day actually start? When the kids are on the bus? When they're on campus?
No,
when does that day count?
We don't run buses. That's the easiest way to think about it. Is we do not run buses. If a student, it's a very rare thing, but if a student makes it to school on a school bus, it can count as a day.
That was my question.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Dr. Weaver, how many parents did you say were represented on the team?
4. We had 4 parent representatives. We held 2 different meetings, and I had 2 parents that remained constant at all the meetings.
Okay. I say, as a parent, I like this calendar a lot because you're eager to get your kids back into school at the beginning of the school year. But then by Memorial Day, it seems like everybody's just kind of ready to be out of school. So I really like the calendar for the 2021-2022 school year. Thank you to everybody who worked on it.
So I have a couple of questions. How does the virtual day affect the weather waiver?
If we have a virtual day because of weather, it can count in the formula because it was not a normal school day. If you look at the designations of school days, it is not considered a normal school day. We did not run buses. It was dangerous for staff to get in, things such as that.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I wanted to be sure. And would graduation potentially be the 27th and 28th of May?
Yes, ma'am. So that would be when I asked principals and staff members about graduation on Memorial Day weekend or postponing it until the following weekend, the overwhelming majority stated that they were more interested in having it on Memorial Day weekend, as opposed to having a 4 or 5 day delay and then having graduation.
Thank you. I too like the calendar a lot. I think everybody's excited how it's all going to come together. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Next up, I wanted to give you a little bit of, I want to give you some updates of what we're doing with pre-K and our federal programs. And we have Audrey Renaud with us, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Renaud.
Good evening, everyone. It is great to be with you this evening, and I'm excited to give you some updates on early learning, our federal programs, and AIG. I'm going to spend a little more time with early learning and just give you a glimmer into the federal programs and AIG. You can go to the next slide, Dr. Mandir. If you look on this slide, you can see precious faces of our children. You can see that they're happy, they're learning. You see our teachers, they have their mask on. We're following all the protocols, but our kids are happy and they're learning. I hope that you've had a chance to stop by the bulletin board out here and see additional faces. But you can see lots of learning happening in these pictures. I think the pictures speak for themselves. Dr. Mandir, you can go to the next one. So what do we do in pre-K? You can see anytime you stop into our classrooms, the kids are singing, they're dancing, they're playing, they're counting. They're doing all kinds of pre-literacy, pre-math skills, they're problem solving, they eat together, they help one another. This is the first opportunity for many of our students to be away from parents. So teachers are building those important relationships. They're also helping the children understand that school is a safe place, and it's just a great experience for our children. They're getting social learning, their emotions are being met. It's a great opportunity in our preschools. They have fun learning every day. And then how do they learn? They have face-to-face learning. They have Google Meets just like any of our other children, especially on Fridays. And they have Google Classroom activities, and they do lots and lots of hands-on and engaged learning. You can go to the next slide, Dr. Mandir. When you look at our numbers, we have 48 students total. At the Beehive at BES, we have 12 children, 1 teacher, and 1 teacher assistant. And then at both of our other locations, we have 18 children, 1 teacher and 2 teacher assistants. And the reason that we have 18 at the Cub House and at the Cubs Den and only 12 at BES is because that's all we're licensed for. So you can see we are completely full. We have a waiting list. We have people who want to be in our program, and that's great. But right now, that's all, we're at capacity. You can go to the next slide, Dr. Mandir. So our kids are learning and they're having fun and they're preparing to be successful in the rest of their school career. We know that our preschools offer this early learning so that our children can be successful in their future academics, in their emotional and their social success, and we want that to continue. So looking into the future, we would love to open a classroom at Pisgah Forest if there's space. We know that that's typically one of our larger schools, so space is an issue. And then down the road, adding additional classrooms in our current schools so that we have more than 1 preschool classroom. And then that's all about preschool. And of course, this is just a 10-foot view. And I don't know if you want to ask me preschool questions now or if you want me to go on to the end and you just ask me questions at the end.
Audrey, I'd like a preschool question. What
Certainly.
would be involved in us expanding our license to serve more students?
Absolutely. So we have 2 facets here. At Brevard Elementary School, in the classroom that we are currently in, we can't expand that number. We would need another classroom in order to put more children. When you look at space, for outside space, we have to have 100 square feet per child. On an inside environment, we have to have 25 square feet per child. So the classrooms are larger at T.C. Henderson and at Rosman Elementary School in comparison to the space that we have at Brevard Elementary School. And then, of course, once we have the space, then we need to go through, we would have to have licensing in, we would have to have DCDEE in, Health and Human Services in, we would have to have an NC Pre-K licensing come in, and then have all of our sanitation and safety inspections before we could have another location. But if we could find a space, we can make the other happen. Thanks for asking. Okay, next slide, Dr. McDears. Every year we apply for our federal programs, and it's all based on our free and reduced lunch numbers. I shared these numbers with you, knowing that these numbers are not typical of the numbers that we usually have. So when you look at Brevard Elementary, the schools in purple, of course, are elementary schools, and those are the schools that use our Title I money. You see Brevard Middle, Brevard High School, Rosman Middle, and Rosman High School in Davidson River. They're in the teal color. These numbers are very important whenever we go to apply for federal funding. Right now, as I said, these numbers are not true representation of what we normally have, and they play a big factor in the funds that we will receive next year, because all of our funding is based on our free and reduced. So let me give you an example. So typically, if you take Brevard Elementary School that's at 47%, they usually are at 67%. Pisgah Forest is at 51%, but typically at 61%. Rosman is at 55%. They typically are 70%. And then TC Henderson is at 52%, and they're typically 88%. So these numbers are critical, and right now the USDA has said that children will eat at no charge for the remainder of the year, and that is phenomenal, and that is great. The issue is that we've got to do something to get our numbers up, because this will impact our funding that we receive in the fall. And at 47%, that's below what we need for our district to receive money. We need to be at 50% in our district. We'll flip to the next slide. And so these are all of the titles that we usually apply for: Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV. But all of those funds will be impacted by the reduced numbers of our free and reduced lunch applications. So that's a pretty big impact. And then last but not least, you can go to the next one, Dr. McDears. So on our AIG, I'm just going to give you a 10,000-foot view. Currently, we have 254 students identified, which that's great. We typically are between 8 and 10% of our identified students. That nurturing group, that's a little bit higher than what I originally put on there. The number is actually 329, and that's about 10% of our population that we nurture. So when you look at the 8% of identified students and the 10% that we nurture, we're serving about 18% of our population, giving them that extended and refining and challenging opportunities. Right now, we've got testing going on in our elementary schools. In the spring, we usually do a screener at the end of third grade, but due to closing, we weren't able to do the screener for third graders. We did that in the fall of this year. So now we're involved in the COGAT, and we'll be identifying more of our students. And we have multiple pathways to identify those students. So we identify them, and then of course we meet their needs and we serve them. So it's great that we have the opportunity to nurture these children, because then we can better identify them down the road. And that's it. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Those are more of our kids.
I have
those
a
great
question.
smiling faces. Yes, Mr. Jackson.
Once again, this to increase my knowledge. What is AIG?
That's academically and intellectually gifted.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Audrey, how many AIG staff members do we currently have?
So currently we have one at each of our schools, except TC Henderson for our elementary and middle. And the AIG teacher at TC Henderson is AIG testing coordinator and instructional coach. But she's still an AIG teacher up there. And then of course at the high school level, Heidi Bullock make sure that she extends and refines and offers all of those benefits, whether it's curriculum compacting, encouraging the dual enrollment, or credit by demonstrated mastery.
Okay. And a question, Audrey, not related to your slides. Is ESL under your purview as well?
It is. So ESL is actually that Title III that's on there, and that Title III helps us to make sure that we are supporting with high quality language instruction for our ELLs.
And how many staff members do we have in that program?
We have 2 teachers and a TA.
And how many students are we serving in that program?
Right. So right now it's about 95.
Okay.
So I have a question.
Sure.
The free and reduced
Yes.
numbers, other systems are bound to be having the same issue? Do you
Yes,
have
ma'am.
any
And
thoughts how that might affect funding?
Well, right now it's a concern for multiple districts because we know that that's what we depend on. So a couple things, our principals have reached out to parents to say, please fill out this application. It's very important for our district, but we're also waiting on DPI to give us more direction on what will be our option. Will it be that we can use the numbers from this year and carry them over, because we know that these are not accurate numbers? So that we need some other way of qualifying for funding, because we can't do without our funding. For example, just our Title I funding alone pays for about 17 teaching positions, and then a little bit goes to instructional supply money, and then 1% goes to parent involvement, which of course is a mandate of Title I.
So, Audrey, if we were to ask for a hold harmless provision, would that need to come from the State Board of Education or from the Education Department at the federal level?
Right now, we're being told, Mr. Kivanini, that that is not an option. That when I have just recently spoken with some folks at DPI and was told that our numbers are our numbers, but they are looking for other ways for us to qualify, whether that's through census data, whether that's using our numbers from spring of last year for our free and reduced. For example, whenever I did the Title I numbers this year and we get our per pupil, just to kind of put it in perspective, I used the number 901 for elementary, and this year that's compared to 667. So you can see a big difference there in that number that we're working with. So we know that there has to be another option for us to qualify. We just don't know what those are at this point, but we are really working hard with the state to make sure that we do get all the information that we need so we can make informed decisions.
And as Ms. Renaud alluded to, there's several things, one of which may be that because everyone can eat free right now under the direction of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is great during the pandemic, it may be that a number of parents have chosen not to fill out the forms because they don't see the need right now.
Right.
And I can't remember, when do you apply for these fundings?
So for the federal funding, we actually apply for those at the end of June, July, whenever that application opens in CCIP, but we use the data from March, April, or May. And I work with Carolyn Barton to get those numbers, and that number comes directly from our free and reduced lunch applications. But we sent home free and reduced lunch applications at the beginning of the year. Once we started this second semester after Christmas, we sent those home again. We've asked principals to make phone calls because we know that folks just, for various reasons, have not applied. And we really need parents to fill out those application forms for us. Anything
you
else?
mentioned we have a waiting list. I have a lot of people ask me, what do you have to do to get into the classes and to be on the waiting list? So could you briefly highlight
Certainly.
what a student does to qualify for our pre-K?
Yes. So thank you for asking that question. There are a couple things. If somebody wants to be on the waiting list, they can call me, they can email me, and we will put them on the waiting list today to be in the program next year. Right now, we're waiting on NC Pre-K applications, and several of our families are filling out the NC Pre-K applications. So once they call me and I put them on the list, when we have those applications, I give them a phone call to say, we're ready to enroll your child into preschool. Right now, we can't enroll. That's why we have 9 on the waiting list, because we don't have a space to put them. Once we do have the applications, they fill out the application. If they're applying for NC Pre-K funding, they fill that application out and I send it to Smart Start. They also fill out our school information form so that we have that. And then once we get the information back from Smart Start, I call the parent and say, you've qualified for NC Pre-K, or you have not qualified for NC Pre-K, and if you want to be in our program, you would be a self-pay. We are an inclusive program, and so we have students with disabilities, we have low-income students, and we have full pay. I wish we had room to put everyone in that wanted to be there. I know that I've had phone calls last week, parents really needing a place for their child to be, since a couple of the other agencies around us are not open yet.
And it is, so you talk about it being inclusive.
Yes.
So it's not based on financial need first. It's just based on the waiting list.
It is. We get roughly 35 slots for NC Pre-K, because we know that in our county we have a high need for quality childcare and learning, but parents can't afford that price tag. And ours is $600, which is a very competitive price compared to other daycares, child development centers in our district. And so of that, when you look at our breakdown right now, we have 29 students that are NC Pre-K, we have 13 that are developmental delay, and we have 6 self-pay. So somebody would not be bumped out if we had the room for them. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Except for right now, because we have no room.
Exactly.
And it's a great problem to have that we have, but that's all we can hold are 48 students with 18, 18, and 12. Other questions for me?
Yes, let me see if I understand this correctly. Basically, it's first come, first served based on when they fill out their applications and how soon you get through all the different areas of checking on the application, things like that.
Yes, but it's a very quick turnaround, and I have a qualifying number. If a parent calls me and they tell me that they're a family of 5, then I can give them a qualifying number. We have them fill out the papers quickly, and it's not a long process. I get back with those parents ASAP.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Audrey, you may have already mentioned this and it went over my head, but how many do we currently have on the waiting list?
9.
That's not bad.
That's 9 that would start tomorrow if we had a place for them, but those know that they're going to start in August whenever we start. And we start just like everybody else, same day as everybody else. We have been 4 days a week since the Monday after Labor Day. We've been wearing masks, and the children are learning, and it's been great. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate all the information. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Renaud. Next up, talk a little bit about our efforts and the science of reading, and I will turn it over to Carrie Norris.
Good evening, everyone. It's fitting that I follow Ms. Renault's presentation. We were both primary grade teachers for a long time, and we both strongly believe that K through 2 is prime time to teach kids to read, but not only K through 2, also pre-K. So we've talked a lot about wishing we had more room for these kiddos to get started on their educational journey, and hopefully we can do that in the future. So it's nice to have somebody else here that's a former first grade teacher, kindergarten teacher in the building. So I'm going to talk a little bit about science of reading. You've heard this phrase before. Dr. McDarris mentioned this a few months ago that we were diving into this. The science of reading is basically just a compilation of about 20 years of research conducted by cognitive scientists that actually have learned how the brain reads. And a lot of times over the science of reading is shared, a lot of teachers, including myself, I'm on year 21, can't believe it's been out there for that long and it hasn't been publicized widely. So the reason it's kind of coming to forefront today is because it's in the Comprehensive Plan for Reading Achievement. And that's for grades K through 3, which is in North Carolina, part of the Read to Achieve. I actually just saw today, though, that the new state superintendent, Catherine Truitt, has that at the very top of her list for the budget for the next school year is on the science of reading. So I'm going to tell you a little bit today. There's going to be a lot more to come, which is really exciting. And I just have number 4 right there. Will I have to change my reading? Those of you, Mr. Kevin Emmy, that Courtney, who have been in the education world for a long time, no, everything that we've been doing is great. We're going to tweak a few things, but a lot of those heavy, tried and true traditions will stay the same. So you can scroll on down, Dr. Medeiros. So as far as reading block goes, that's within our ELA block. What are we doing right now that already aligns with the research that is coming out? Well, we already have a good explicit phonics program. Ms. Renault, whenever she came to the county 6-7 years ago, got that started, which was awesome. We have Open Court in several of our schools, and then Letterland is the program that Pisgah Forest does. So every single school has an explicit phonics program, a dedicated time to teach that program in K through 2. Something new we started this year, it's called Heggerty Phonemic Awareness. Phonemic awareness is how you hear the sounds. That has to come first. That's the foundation of learning to read. So we're boosting that in our K1 classes and also some second grade classes. Just building that up so when they get to 4th and 5th grade, they can decode those big long words and merge into a stronger reader. Okay. So the big differences as we go into the next school year. Number 1, we'll continue doing those phonics programs, which is Open Core and Letterland. One difference will be is that we're going as deep as the program allows us. So that means we're not picking and choosing in our classroom what we do. We're doing it exactly how it's developed. That should include decodable readers. And a decodable reader is a sentence like, Pat sat on a rat. You've just taught the short A, and so the kids then go practice that. So just making sure that we're doing every facet of the phonics instruction. Also, I'm happy to see that spelling is coming back with a big force. My 8th grader is a terrible speller. So spelling is coming back heavy, not only in early grades, also in upper grades. I often hear middle school teachers talk about spelling and how the kids' spelling is terrible. A couple of years ago, we were saying that spell check will catch that. That's true, but the research in science of reading now shows us that spelling is actually a factor that builds those reading skills internally. So bringing that back, there's a great program called Spellography. I've seen in action at Brevard Elementary, doing that with some 4th and 5th graders. So we actually purchased 6 more kits and have that dispersed throughout the county to kind of get their feet wet with that program. So that's exciting. Up there on the very top, that one little blue phrase, you'll see less reliance on the cueing system. Cueing system is what I was taught in college 21 years ago, that you look at the picture and you take a guess on what the word might be, or you read ahead what would make sense. So instead of doing those strategies, it will be more about teaching that exact phonics pattern, looking more at the exact word rather than all the other context clues. Those strategies come on as you're getting older, but not as crucial at the early grades. Then the last little section talks about structured literacy block versus balanced literacy. What that means is a structured literacy block is it's totally immersed into that reading research. So right now, kids do a lot of read to self or partner read. There's not as much direct teacher instruction, and that will happen next year, meaning that teachers will be teaching the kids direct lessons for more than half of the ELA block before they break out into their small groups. Okay, so I'm one of those, I have to kind of chart our path and I have to look way into the future. So where are we and then where are we going? And so we've done a lot of things already this year to get our feet wet. I talk to teachers. It's kind of like we have a suitcase and we're packing the suitcase with knowledge before we go on our trip. So we did a great overview session with NCAT. That was really informative. We have a group of 16 teachers doing a reading league academy with me. And that meets, I think it's every 5 weeks. It's a great 3-hour session with a live trainer. So that's been exciting. Talked about the spellography, continue with our open court. And actually from the short little blurb that Dr. McDarris shared a few months ago about science of reading, we didn't realize at the time, but we had a reporter from EdNC that was watching or watched it later. And so he contacted Kevin Smith and Dr. McDarris and I, and he's actually embedding himself into our county. And so what that means is he comes to our training, he watches us, he talks to us about the things that we're learning. He has went to Roslyn Elementary last week and actually spent a day just watching the various reading things going on. He's also doing a kind of a study on 2 teachers. One is a pretty recent teacher graduating from college. Another one is a longtime veteran, about the way that they learn that kids read and what they think about these new ideas that we're now bringing to the forefront. So it's just exciting to see our small county in the Western region getting this spotlight and watching us grow. And I always, remind teachers, I talked about the suitcase and packing our knowledge. And up there on the left, you can see where our average is. This is grades 3 through 8. And we had 62 kids proficient in reading. That's a score of 3, 4, and 5. That is not terrible. We're actually above the state average in many different counties. But we always want to look at the other side, at the students that we haven't reached. So as I talk about the science of reading, it is very much focused on K through 2, but by doing these things, we're going to help 5th grade readers and 7th grade readers and into high school be able to decode a little better. You can scroll on down, Dr. McDarris. And I really like this quote. I keep saying this to teachers, is that it's not the pan, it's the chef that makes things happen. And by that, I mean, that's why we're packing our suitcase of knowledge. We can't ever move to adopt a program if we don't understand the why, but why we're teaching reading this way. We're doing that exact thing actually this semester with math, learning about solid math instruction before selecting something. So that's just a sneak peek. Like I said, you're going to hear about science of reading a lot more in the year to come and probably even the year after that. Any questions?
Yes, Carrie, and looking at the brief amount regarding the research, it's indicated that the ability to learn phonics depends on both working memory and auditory processing, and identified 3 areas in which auditory processing might be limited. A child who has had frequent ear infections, auditory processing disorders, and English language learners. Do we have a simple screening device to indicate whether a child has an auditory processing problem?
That's a good question, Mr. Kevnemi. We do have different screeners, different universal screeners that we're doing, but also with the auditory processing, that's where that phonemic awareness would come about, and the student would enter what we call the MTSS process, and our goal is to identify them earlier, 5 and 6 year olds, than we have before, to be able to tackle those interventions much earlier.
Okay.
Are teachers having to change the way they teach or learn different methods of teaching to be in this program?
Good question, Mr. Jackson. So no, not right now. Right now, like I said, we are just learning. So we're learning things. Sometimes they will implement something new, but we did not want this to be a big overhaul. So With the one activity that I mentioned, which is called Hegarty Phonemic Awareness, that is only 10 minutes a day. And so I tell teachers, I think of this lesson, it's like a vitamin. You're given that extra vitamin during the ELA block to help students. So, we're always keeping in our mind that these teachers are still in the middle of a pandemic. They still have the stressors of that in addition to everything else on a daily basis. So we're not changing everything all at once. It will lend itself to changes over the next year, primarily in K through 2. But that will be changes for the better in the long run.
A couple of following questions. One of them, Candace, was going to be, do we have any kind of a program to professional development for these teachers? If they
We do. Yes, we do. We actually have that group I mentioned with the Reading League, that's 16 teachers. But actually, we have just partnered with RESA. RESA let me do a group purchase, and this was an optional sign up for the Science of Reading webinars. There's 5 sessions. And I'm pleased to announce we had over 100 teachers sign up for this. This is K through 8. So that just told me they were eager to learn. It's spaced out throughout the semester, so we're not slamming them all at once.
Okay, and third question, do newer teachers just coming out of college, are they already up to date on this versus someone who's been teaching for a number of years?
That's another really great question, because that is actually a huge debate in North Carolina. I will say Lenore Ryan is recognized as one of the best teacher ed programs right now because they teach the science of reading. So, Mr. Jackson, to answer your question, no. A lot of higher ed universities have not been teaching this explicitly. And there's a lot of groups in North Carolina trying to correct that. I actually sent one of our recent PD sessions to Brevard College. I have a good relationship with the ed department, so trying to share that as much as we can, but it is not being taught widely how to teach kids to read with this research specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie, I'm a little concerned that we're using one phonics program at all of our elementary schools except one. Are we seeing any confusion between children moving back and forth between schools as regards to using either open court or letterland?
Mr. Kevinimi, no, we have not seen that. And actually, whenever we started the online learning path, that's one of the things that we thought about, because we had a PFE teacher that teaches letterland teaching a Brevard Elementary student that does open court, and when they come back, will there be a difference with the letter names, how they learned it? And to my knowledge, no face-to-face teachers have said that that's a problem yet. Ideally, we obviously want the entire county on the same program for as students move school to school. Pisgah Forest just had a strong desire to do letterland, and so they ordered that 2 years ago. I do know that at our other schools, at least 2 of those other schools, letterland is used as an EC intervention. So there is some overlap there. But I will say I have actually done some observations at 2 elementary schools recently and been able to see letterland in action and open court in action. And they both have all the pieces that they need to have other than decodable readers. And that's something we're working on.
Second question related to that. And it just left my mind and went to Pittsburgh somewhere. Yes, it's back now. That falls under my 30-30 rule. I will remember in 30 seconds or 30 minutes. The question was, is there any research that indicates whether open court or letterland one is more effective than the other?
I am looking into that right now. They both have all of the pieces as far as effectiveness, but I'm still researching that, Mr. Kevinimi, to see if one comes out on top.
Okay. Well, I will say, for the benefit of the other board members, I am ancient in the system, so I was here when we first adopted open court, I don't know, 20 years or so ago, and then we got a new superintendent and a new director of instruction and went into a different direction. I am so pleased to see that we are back to open court. I saw some amazing ability of primary children to decode words using that program.
Carrie, I just wanted to say that the spellography, my son has been involved in that group at Brevard Elementary, and it has been great for him. And I actually talked with his teacher today on how she's able to take her iStation results and even trying to incorporate the spellography into and working with Miss Whitman on those. So I've been getting great feedback from my son's teacher, and then also too, I'll be meeting with Miss Whitman this week to go over some of those. So I'm very pleased that we have that program. I know my son likes to, when he's on his phone or when he's using his iPad, he likes to talk into it rather than like typing out what he wants. And so I think that that's one of the issues that we see probably across the board with all students, is that technology is just really taking over, having the need for them to spell something out. So I'm really happy that we're getting back into that, because it's so crucial for them later on in life. So
yes, absolutely.
I'll just tack on to what Courtney said. I'm so excited to see the spellography and the focus on that. I think it's going to be very important. I think it's not just now. I can remember one of my brothers, they changed some programs when he was in school versus what some of my other family had, and it made a difference. So I'm really excited. I think this is going to be really great and helpful to our students. And when we talk about doing it in those younger grades, that's the foundation that's being built that's going to take them on into those fifth grade and further. So I'm really excited about this.
Great. Well, I'll keep you guys posted as we go through this throughout the next semester as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Norris. Next up, just an update on our TCS online learning path, and I will turn it over to Mrs. Ellenberger.
So good evening. I'm excited to give you a brief update on our Transylvania County Schools online learning path. And so just to recap a little bit on the next slide, Dr. McDarris, we started the online learning path due to COVID. I'm excited that we did. I think it was something that we needed to do as a county. And so I wish we hadn't had to do it because of COVID, but it's turned out to be a really positive thing for so many of our students. We created this in July, and the online learning path has allowed those students and families that had some health concerns or other issues to be able to learn from home. The one really great thing about the online learning path, just as a reminder, is that we really had to look and work together as a district instead of being so focused on one school. So for example, a teacher from Pisgah Forest Elementary School may have students from Rosman Elementary, Brevard Elementary, PFE, all in one class. Same for our middle schools and high schools. A Rosman High School math teacher might be teaching a class full of Brevard High students and Rosman High students, possibly some Davidson River School students. So it's really helped us to come together across the board and really focus on doing what's right for kids. So that's been a positive that has come out of this. In October and November, we sent out the spring applications. Students signed up for the spring semester, and once they signed up, they were in it for the spring semester. And so we'll move forward to the next slides, and Ms. Norris will talk to you and give you some numbers on the elementary and middle school, and then I'll jump back in for the high school.
Okay. Like Missy said, online learning is very unique in Transylvania County because we did look across the district as one. And it's been a lot of fun. I meet monthly with the groups, and the elementary crew, they comprised of all the three different schools. But we come together just to problem solve issues, but they absolutely, I think I can say 100% of them have absolutely loved the online teaching platform. So that's been neat to see their successes throughout the semester. So in the fall, I did this little slide so you could see the differences. In the fall, we had 22 teachers. They were all completely committed to only online. Again, the difference between some other districts might be where a teacher is teaching online and then also has students in person. They are just totally devoted to that. We had 470 students K through 5 and online. And you can see in the spring how we dropped. We went to 14 teachers and then 344 students. So those teachers that are no longer online reverted back to face-to-face. Some of those are single grade, meaning just second grade or third grade. Some of those are doing a combination class. It might be a second, third, or fourth, fifth, just depending on the student needs. A typical day, I just want you to see.
Do you have some reason why the number of students went down?
I think parents just felt more comfortable with the pandemic at that point and felt like they could merge back into school. Some parents also saw that with their work schedules, they needed to go back into school. And, we encouraged them unless they needed to stay in online and they really felt like it was working for their child. We, of course, obviously feel like face-to-face is our ultimate learning platform. So we encourage that if they felt comfortable to come back to face-to-face.
And I think also, Carrie, if you don't mind me jumping in, Mr. Jackson, I think a lot of families and students saw what a really diligent job the schools were doing with their safety measures. And so that allowed those students and those parents to feel safe in sending their kids back to school.
And then the little section at the bottom just talks about a typical day. We knew that we did not want students to sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day. That is not how a typical day works because we have recess and we have lunch and we have all the other transitions. So the teachers start at 8:30 and that is through a Google Meet. And that's where we talk about our social emotional, kind of like a morning check-in, do some kind of team building something, and then it goes into their whole group lessons. This semester, we're really trying to push the interventions a little more. So the regular school day for those students may end at 12 o'clock. They eat lunch, but then from 12:30 to 1:30, the teacher may have different small groups logging back on to get reading interventions or math interventions, whatever needed. You can scroll down to middle school too. Next, Dr. McGarris. Middle school, I just did the same layout. That's a little different than elementary. You can see at the top, we started with 7 teachers, a blend. We did have some that were teaching OLP first period, and then third period taught a face-to-face class. That was very small in numbers if we had that. We had 310 students in the fall. Now we have only 186 students in middle school. And that we had, same thing as elementary, we had some kids that came back into school because parents felt comfortable. They felt like on face-to-face was better. We did have some where we had to really talk to the family and let them know the student was not doing their work, the student was not being successful, and they needed to move them back in. And we really have had good support from families. They've listened to us and they have moved them back into what they needed. Same kind of day as elementary school where they get started. They have their different blocks. And then same thing in the spring. Now we're pushing for that intervention time in the afternoon and also on Fridays for students that may need it. And then Missy can talk about high school.
So similar scenarios. In the fall, we had a variety of delivery methods for our online students. Some of our teachers were 100% online, meaning their entire day was spent teaching in the online learning path. Some of our teachers were partially online and partially face-to-face, so they may have had one class that was online and then 2 face-to-face classes. And then there was also the blended option for students. And that tended to be in the fall, at least some of our upper level courses, our AP courses, where students, say for AP Stats, would blend in with the regular face-to-face students. So a variety of methods were used to meet the needs of those students. In the fall, 264 students total. Rough estimate, that was about 200 Brevard High School students and 64 Rosman High School students. And then in the spring, similar delivery methods are used. We don't have any teachers that are 100% online. When we looked at the numbers, found it would be much more effective not to pull a whole teacher out of the building just to do online. And so they take sections of the online learning path. Spring enrollment for online learning path is down, as is the case in elementary and middle. We have a total of 123 students, 97 Brevard High School and 26 Rosman. So it's encouraging to have those students back on campus, but it's also, really important to remember that online learning path isn't going anywhere. So we'll still be able to meet the needs of those students who are really doing a good job learning online. A typical day for a high school student in the online learning path is similar to what they would have face-to-face. Students would actually log into their classes at the scheduled time. So for example, if they have Mr. Hogan for first period world history, they would log in at 8:05 for his class, whether it be completely online, blended, that is their scheduled time period. So they go through the course of the day just like any other student would do. If a student is in a completely online class, then they would meet the 4 days a week for 45 minutes with their teacher for the instruction, and then be provided some supplemental remote practice. If it's a blended class, then they would meet with either the A day or the B day kids remotely. And so that has seemed to work for our teachers and for our students. It is a lot for our teachers to manage, but they are doing a really, really fantastic job with it. Any questions about the high school, or actually any questions for Carrie or I, either one? Okay, just briefly looking ahead, some things that we could kind of see happening. Possibly a K-8 online learning path school for maybe the school year 21-22. We imagine high school would roll along similarly to how it is now. Always looking to improve and do better, but kind of a similar path, because you just can't have one math teacher for all of the high school maths. And then, probably the most challenging thing for our teachers are the blended classrooms, because they're teaching face-to-face, but maybe they have a Google class meet over here. So that's been challenging for our teachers. I know one of our English teachers has said, he has a face-to-face student that kind of manages the students who are online, as far as if they raise their hand, that face-to-face student will raise their hand and, say, hey, such and such has a question. So they are problem solvers, and they're being super creative with what they're doing so that they can provide really great instruction to the students. But it's challenging. So, questions?
Yeah, one comment, one question. Yes, I would definitely like to see us eliminate blended classes. I'm amazed that the teachers are able to keep their sanity and do that. But then a question related to the middle school numbers. Carrie, from the fall to the spring, the number of students in the online learning path decreased by 124 students, but we still kept 7 teachers doing that. Why is that?
That is because, Mr. Kevin, in the fall, the 7 teachers, I think 6 out of 7 were totally doing online. And then in the spring, we have several that are doing 2 classes of online, 2 classes in person. So just the makeup of what they were teaching was different. And it's not the same 7 teachers. We had, I believe, 3 teachers that just truly needed a break. They wanted to be face-to-face with kids. So principals were very good to honor that. And then we had new people come in. So that's the reason the teacher numbers stayed the same. And I will say, like Missy talked about with tentative goals and ideas, we definitely want to offer this platform ongoing. we've had a few families just recently call and talk to me about wanting to register in August, but they specifically want to do online learning path, and they have been doing homeschool till now. So that's exciting to get some of those students back that are going to be able to fall under our school system for this platform.
What is an A day and a B day in the blended?
So it's similar, Mr. Jackson, to how our face-to-face students do. It last names A through L come on Monday and Wednesday. That's the A day. And then M through Z are B day students, typically, with some exceptions. And so what the teacher does with the blended class, she'll look at those class loads and then talk to those blended students to figure out what day works best for them, trying to keep them all together. But, you know, if students need to be separate, then she does that as well, or he.
Why do you want to eliminate the blended days?
It's just not really the days, but the classes, because it's just so challenging for a teacher to have to monitor a computer of a Google Meet while teaching face-to-face. It's hard to kind of manage a virtual learning environment with a face-to-face.
And that's going on at the same time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you know,
I can see that would be a problem.
Yeah, and we're fortunate in Transylvania County, just to kind of brag on our county a little bit, and our teachers. There are, and I'm looking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish blended classes at the high school, which is not fantastic. Obviously, we want that to be 0, but I know in some surrounding counties, almost all of their classes are blended. They don't have a separate online learning path. So we're definitely heading in the right direction. I feel good about what we're doing. But like I said, we always want to grow and get better.
Okay. Dr. McDarris, I have a question for you concerning middle school. I was reading through this afternoon the North Carolina School Board Association's synopsis of what different school systems are doing. And I noticed that Polk County approved several months ago for Polk Middle School to go to a 4-day learning week. How are they doing that under the current guidelines?
Polk County has the benefit, same thing that they did. They started their elementary earlier than a lot of people too. And the reason was when Polk County built the new high school and they worked on some of their other schools, they did not give up their other old school buildings. So, for example, what happens is they have Old Tryon High School, and it is huge. And so they can spread out and have enough rooms and distancing that they can have the social distancing met by having more days in. That's a luxury that they have. It was a credit to them holding on to those old buildings.
Being an old classroom teacher, and like I said, the good old days, that's what people tell me. What type of process do you have making sure the students are online, attending like they should, doing what they should be doing, and for a better term, just not playing the game with us, Missy?
So each of our high schools has been very diligent about asking teachers to make phone calls instead of, the typical email or a Remind app, whatever it may be, but to personally reach out. And teachers have done a great job of that. I mean, that's how, we did it back in the older days, but they've been doing a really good job of that. And when they struggle to reach a parent, they'll request help from admin. The teachers have just been doing a tremendous job really staying on top of these students, because it is really easy for some of them to log into a class and you can't really require a camera to be on. So what are they doing when the camera is off? And teachers have come up with some pretty unique strategies. They'll call on students, but it's really just been that reaching out and trying their best to make their lessons super engaging so that the students want to be there. We do record the lessons so students can watch it at a later date. Students who were not so successful in the fall, I know that the admin team at Brevard High School and Rosman High School, they made phone calls, they did home visits, and they got those students back in the building for spring semester. That's another reason you see those numbers go down. So, it was just a reaching out to parents and saying, hey, your student is probably going to be more successful in the building. So a lot of that happened in the fall as well. So.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Thank you very much. I think it's,
Thank you, Mrs.
as always,
Norris,
our
Mrs.
teachers
Ellenberger.
stepped up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that was really a good segue to go into a little bit of an update about what we're seeing with being in school. How are we doing? Let me throw out some numbers, and I had a lot of different responses from our principals and counselors. We continue to have low numbers of contact positives in our schools. We've been very fortunate in Transylvania County. I would be remiss if I didn't over and over say that the partnership we have with the health department has been just crucial. We are not experiencing a positive spread by students in our schools. It is true that there are positive contacts that are occurring outside of our school buildings. We can enforce rules with distancing and mask and washing in the buildings. Unfortunately, we can't always control what happens on weekends. As Dr. Weaver can attest, we have multiple conversations. I know Dr. Weaver talks to our school nurses, I say on a daily basis. Sometimes it is hourly, but it's definitely daily, meeting with all of our school nurses to get updates on what is going on. And they are just remarkable. They are very, very busy. You have to remember that not only are they doing things for our schools, but they are also assisting the health department with some of the other things that are going on in our county, such as vaccination clinics. Contact tracing and the enforcement of rules are keeping us moving forward. The contact tracing identifies who needs to quarantine and who is not required to do so. Now, we do make courtesy phone calls to parents in a particular classroom as needed. However, if they need to quarantine or seek testing, they are told accordingly, and the school nurses help us greatly with that. You heard earlier that many students previously on the online learning path have now returned to face-to-face. That's not for everyone. Certainly there is an element of online and remote learning and blended learning that every student needs to be comfortable with. They need to be adept in and feel like they understand it. But the reality is, as far as full-time, it's not for everyone. From September to November, just to let you know a little bit about our employees, kind of mixing back and forth with students and teachers, because our teachers are just doing a remarkable job. From September to November, we had 2 employees utilize our employee assistance network that we make available for free for our employees. Only one of those was due to job stress. That's not to say that teachers are not stressed. It's just that they are able to handle it and they are very resilient. Our student numbers for extracurricular activities have remained consistent with last year, and that's really good. Those students have worked very hard. Football season, as you know, has been moved around. Other sports seasons have been moved around, soccer and other things. So they're resilient, they're adapting to that, and we haven't seen a drop-off in our extracurricular activities, which is important for our schools and for our student athletes. We talked earlier about initial failures. Initial failures are up as students adjust to more online interaction and less face-to-face interaction. And that is one of the reasons why our school administrators and counselors and teachers are trying to do the reach outs. And as noted, we do have those tough conversations with some families where the reality is their student is not being successful in the current atmosphere. And so we encourage them to consider coming back face-to-face because of that, as we try to work to make up those failures. Principals and counselors are reporting that loss of routine, family struggles with food or finances, and social isolation away from friends is having an impact on many students. That is one of the outcomes of the pandemic that we're seeing. The more that they are not in the building, the more that we are seeing some of these issues of isolation. There's even some reports nationwide of some issues related to suicidal thoughts, and those tend to be heavily situated among students who have very little face-to-face interaction. Speaking of that type of anxiety, it appears we do have more instances of anxiety in our students. Some of our students are thriving with the half virtual schedule, while others are really struggling with the anxiety, particularly those students that do not do well without having interaction with their peers. The extra isolation paired with less stability in some cases at home is impacting many of our students. 360 classes were failed last semester, and most of this is the result of students not being self-disciplined enough to complete work online. Student-wise, students crave to be at school as well as many parents want them in school. It's not 100%, but the majority. Just for the organization and the consistency. Many students tell us that being at home is not preferred to being at school. I think that's a surprising outcome that we may not have totally predicted before, but it's not preferred over being at school. Here's some comments from some of our principals and counselors that I wanted to share with you. One of the saddest conversations they've had this year was with an online learning student and his mother. The student was begging to come back to Plan B. The mom admitted that she was scared of him and their entire family dying. That's a direct quote. But the student kept crying aloud and asking to come back. They did follow up with some counseling suggestions, and that is something I want to commend our school staff, our administrators, and our teachers, that they are doing everything they can to reach out, even if it's a student that's not face-to-face. We know that they're stressed and worried and nervous. Overall, student discipline, it's not apathy or a lack of work ethic for a variety of reasons, but student discipline has plummeted, and it's that discipline of doing the work. Students want to be with their peers. And I, quite frankly, in a byproduct of the pandemic, I'm not having very many disciplinary hearings this year. From an education perspective, this is one quote: I and teachers seeing a large number of students lose their stamina and discipline for learning and the activities that go with learning when they aren't physically there. They just don't do well. They just don't do very easily. We are seeing some students who are struggling with the dynamics of only coming to school 2 days a week. We are getting fewer gaggle alerts than we have in the past. Gaggle, of course, is a screener that we use that if a student uses certain language on our Chromebooks, we have a screener that will pick it up as an alert. We're seeing less student behaviors requiring discipline. In terms of staff, it does depend. Obviously, we know that some are more stressed than others. Students are having difficulty creating or maintaining relationships and difficulty navigating differences between peers. The general feel in the building is much different than last year. January versus September, teachers are struggling with wanting to stay in the school for the kids, but also balancing keeping their own self and family safe. Some more quotes. The most common thing the principal was hearing is, I'm so glad we're in school. Students, I'm so glad we are in school. I miss my friends and teachers. The quote, I believe that kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, and I believe there's a lot of truth in that. We did do some virtual, one counselor reminded me that they did do virtual counseling while they were out with some students were out, but that does not compare to in-person counseling. One noted that they've met with many students regarding food insecurities. Fortunately, our Free Food Fridays have really helped with this. We do know that there are students that do not have the daily access to food that they would normally have on a regular schedule. And of course, I think this is probably nationwide, if not worldwide. Students who have never had problems before are showing some problems, particularly with connecting and making friends. As you know, a recent CDC report came out. Federal health officials indicate that the preponderance of available evidence supports in-person instruction. In-person instruction can be carried out safely as long as mask wearing and social distancing are maintained, and this includes hybrid attendance models. For example, I know that Brevard High School principal, I've been out there, I've heard it daily, makes an announcement to remind faculty and others to wear their masks. And there are occasionally some times that we have some individuals, students, or whomever that have to be reminded of this, but it's a daily announcement. The CDC reviewed data from studies in the United States and abroad and found that experience in schools differed from nursing homes and high-density work sites where rapid spread has occurred. And they found that there's little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission. Their conclusion is that with proper prevention efforts, we can keep transmission in schools and educational settings quite low. We've experienced success. We continue to work to achieve success. It's through the hard work of a lot of people. Our students need to be commended. Certainly our parents, definitely our teachers and our school staff and administrators, and the partnership that we have with our many groups. For example, not just the health department, but it was really touching to see a number of the students that when they came back to school, they wanted to make contact with the SROs. So the partnerships we have with the health department and sheriff's department are critical. It is a team effort. I know that gets used a lot as a term, but it's very true in our experience. Just wanted to give the board a little bit of an update and overview, and I'm very glad to answer any questions or engage in any discussion on this.
I just want to say thank you for putting all of this together. I know I reached out to you previously on some of these issues, and just making sure that we continue having these conversations for the sake of our students. And during our school health advisory committee meeting last week, Dr. Ferris said that students are coming to her with, or in general, into any sort of doctor's office that have anxiety that's already elevated so high. So trying to make sure that teachers and principals and other staff members are looking at students and trying to refer them prior to having them already have this escalated anxiety. So that was just something that when I heard that last week, it's like, we really need to have some of these conversations and making sure too that parents feel supported during this. I know that they're struggling as well. So having, again, just that community support, making sure that people know that it is okay to talk to our counselors and to go get help. So again, thank you for putting this together.
Dr. McDarris, I wonder, is some way you could print this out?
Oh, absolutely. Be glad to.
Yeah, I would love to have it.
Absolutely.
And I will comment too that I have some apps on my tablet at home that come from various situations and places. Some of it is pretty political, and I discount that. But overall, the things I read there from commenters all over the United States are exactly what you're saying. We need to have the students back in school. They're not a carrier. They do not contribute to the spread. And it doesn't happen at the school where it does spread. So I think that's very important that people understand that. I understand the fear and that goes along with that parents would have, some students would have.
I do think too
we
that
need to publicize it, I think.
Yes, I think when we reach a point where vaccinations are more readily available, I think that may allay some of the fears. And that's something that's on everyone's mind. I understand, for example, today they opened up a vaccination clinic at 1:00 with appointments, and by 1:03 it was completely filled. So that will help contribute to some reduction of issues too. I assume.
Dr. Medeiros, if I can jump in really quickly, I was just going to say that, as we talk about social emotional needs, we have talked about the transition from elementary to middle school and middle school to high school. Some students will have been out of the school building for an entire year. So we have ideas this spring to really plan and beef up that transition a little bit for those students, for all students, just to help them feel more settled, because being out of the school building for a year is a big deal. So we want to make sure that we support them as they start back August if they choose face-to-face.
Kimsey, I'd like to just clarify one thing that you said. The CDC study does show that there has not been evidence of widespread transmission in school from student to student or from student to teacher, but students can be carriers. Many times they are asymptomatic carriers. And I think that's one reason why we need to emphasize to our students the importance of wearing the mask whenever they're out, not just at school. I've shared this story with a couple of you. This was several months ago. Ann and I were going to have a little in the car picnic up on the Parkway. So we stopped at Subway to get some sandwiches to take up. And behind me in line were 4 students, one obviously middle school student, and the other 3 probably high school. None of them had masks on. Now, normally I don't say anything to anybody because I know how heated it could get. But I finally couldn't take it any longer. And I said, listen, guys, I'm on the Board of Education. We're doing our best to keep schools open. We need you to wear your mask. And the middle schooler popped up and said, well, I wear mine when I'm at school. And so did several of the others. And I emphasized to them that they need to be wearing them all the time. If they want us to keep the schools open, we need the children, the parents, and the community to all be consistent in their mask wearing.
That's true. I agree with you.
I know as a Board of Education, we talk many times about our teachers and our staff and how much we appreciate them and what a good job they do. But in this last year and a half, this school year and the last half of the other, I don't think there's any way that we could possibly find the words to say thank you for everything you do, everything you're doing, all the creative ways you've found to reach the students. And I agree with Courtney and the parents and how they've worked with us and to our students and the ones that are wearing their masks and excited to be back in school and doing the things that we need to do. This is just it's of course been a terrible year in so many ways, but I think there's so much to see in the good of what our system, students and staff and parents and all have done to come together to try to keep us on track as best we can for education. And I just want to say thank you to everyone.
And I'll add on to that too. I spoke with a few teachers, elementary teachers, and asked them just about their assignments that they were getting. How is your homework being turned in? I know there were some issues. And what you said, from the first quarter, they had 50% of students turning in their homework on a regular basis. And then the second quarter, it went up a little bit higher to like 75%. She said that they're still struggling with those. But teachers right now are really working hard in their general time in the classroom, plus having to deal with COVID, that now they're trying to come up with some really creative ways to incentivize kids to turn in their homework. So I know one teacher said that she's, spending a small fortune just to get her kids to turn in work. So That's another thing to consider too, is that teachers are working hard, much harder than they have previously. But a lot of teachers too are also spending their own money just to make sure that their kids, like just to give them rewards for turning in their homework, just so that they know how their kids are performing in the classroom. So I thought that was interesting when I was talking with some teachers last week. So thank you to all of our teachers.
Yeah, I would like
you explain to us, Dr. Medeiros, the situation right now as far as COVID leave from school and how our teachers are paid? Are they having to use their own sick leave? Has that been addressed? How does that stand right now?
You're talking about the extension of the benefits package?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. We received permission. I'll let Dr. Weaver weigh in on this. He was able to coordinate the structure of this. We received permission, in essence, to extend the ability to have teachers take some extended leave because of COVID without having to use their own personal leave. This was in place in the fall. It ran out, but school systems were given permission to extend that if they wanted to do so internally with funding that they had available. And we were able to use some of the CARES funding that we received. I can't remember if it was state CARES or federal CARES, Dr. Weaver, but we were able to use some of the CARES funding to be able to extend that. And it now extends until March 31st. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So it was a continuation of the FFCRA, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. Like Dr. Medeiros said, expired end of December. So what we're using now, we were allowed to continue the general benefits of FFCRA, and we're using the state employees contagious leave policy to layer on top of FFCRA. So if an employee is out due to quarantine or isolation, then they do not have to use their own accrued sick leave or personal leave or annual leave. We are using the contagious leave. So a teacher that's out for, say, 7 or 8 school days, their leave balance is not deducted at all. So we're using the contagious leave to pay for the substitute teachers in those cases.
And we don't know this, Mr. Griffin, we don't know this if this will come to fruition or not. There is a thought that the federal government might intervene and extend some benefits, but we don't know if that's going to happen past March 31st.
The next question, I know I asked it when we first started back to school. Are we providing any protective equipment for our staff? Or do they provide all their own need as far as masks and things along these lines?
We're providing a tremendous amount of equipment. We also have had some donors that have given us quite the stockpile of masks. We've ordered plastic partitions for certain positions. We do have some staff who wear their own personal masks because that is their preference. They're a little bit more stylish than what we can provide. That's the way to describe that. And we're doing a lot of deep cleaning as well.
I'd like to say I appreciate all our presenters tonight, and did a good job, and I learned things, and it's always good.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions or comments on any of the topics that we've discussed tonight? Anything else from you, Dr. Medeiros?
I do not. I will say that we are continuing to explore some other things that may be on the horizon. I'm checking into a product that I've even heard you can spray and it lasts 90 days. I'm trying to get more information on that product. I don't know enough about it yet to say.
I do have one more question. More adjourn. I know that our teachers have had a date to register and sign up for vaccine. Do we have any idea just what type of schedule we're on as far as when this is going to happen?
We do not. That is probably the number one over the first cup of coffee in the morning discussion that we all have here in the building.
So I'm not the first one to ask you that. Then.
No, you're not. We do know, and I really appreciate our health department. We do know that when it becomes close to being available, we'll be alerted, and we've already polled our staff about who wants to take the vaccine and who has chosen not to. We cannot require people to take the vaccine. However, the majority of our signups indicate the majority of our staff are ready to do that whenever it becomes available. Some positive news you probably heard on the news too. Johnson & Johnson's new vaccine is available. I try to read up on these things. It only requires one dose. While it's only 66% effective, their research is showing that it is much higher effective if someone is already sick, and apparently it's only 66, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, it's only 66% effective in preventing it, but if you do get it, it's less cumbersome than the others. So I don't know enough about it, but that's the third one that's out, and so that's good news. That's just going to increase the vaccination abilities, I'm hoping.
I think the figures I've heard on the Johnson & Johnson, you're correct, 66% effective in preventing the virus, 90% effective in preventing serious cases, and so far 100% effective in preventing hospitalizations.
Yeah.
You brought up a good point that I had listed and I forgot to mention it. Immunization. We have a record that you can't come to school unless you have your shots. Is this going to, the vaccine for the COVID, going to be added to that list that our students, unless they take the vaccination, will not be able to attend school? Or has that even been brought to the table or discussed anywhere in the state?
We've not received any indication from any source that it's going to be required. We don't know yet. Have not heard that.
Though I would say, knowing the makeup of the current General Assembly, I cannot imagine any bill of that type ever coming to the floor.
Well, does that mean that our students will not have to have immunization from this point on? But
well,
is it all going to disappear based on? Well, I'm asking questions that nobody can answer. So
there are certain levels of diseases, Mr. Griffin, that do require immunization, but this one hasn't fallen under that. And part of the reasons probably because the effects on young people are not as always dramatic as some of the other childhood diseases are. Some children could be asymptomatic and not even know it, whereas, whooping cough or I guess pertussis or polio would be very different. So I think that's the way they delineate.
Thank you. I'm finished asking questions. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I guess I'll have to roll call for that. It's Courtney?
Aye.
Marty?
Yes.
Ron?
Aye.
Kimsey?
Yes.
And this is Tawny. Yes, we will consider ourselves adjourned. Thank you.